It's borderline embarrassing. We have to blame the Brits for it, as usual. If you ain't listening to Verwoed, I don't know. Lalela's reputation will be forever ruined, but our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. Hi besties, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nsuku. I make lifestyle related videos and recently I've been trying to get into commentary. So I'm in the process of moving right now, so if you hear like an echo in the background, that's because there's literally nothing in this room besides for my suitcases. Anyway, let's get into today's topic. I really couldn't stop myself from commenting on this because it's almost time for Miss Universe, and there's been a lot of backlash towards South Africa given that we're participating in an apartheid state known as Israel. So I can't stop myself from commenting on the fact that Miss South Africa is going to Israel to represent South Africa when she doesn't even have the support of South Africa. So who is she really going there to represent? Well, she's already there now. So who is she there to represent? And is her childhood dream more important than human rights? I'm going to try my best to keep this short, but I'm not making any promises. So let's dive into it. Who is our current Miss South Africa?
Miss South Africa 2021 is Lalela Mswane!
Lalela Mswane is a 24-year-old born in Richards Bay in KwaZulu-Natal to Muntu and Hleliselwe. I hope I said that correctly, Mswane. She is the youngest of 3 children, so she has an older brother and an older sister. She matriculated in 2015 from Port Arthur, Alphen Park. Y'all, I can't pronounce things, okay? I can barely speak English. So she matriculated in 2015 and then she went on to study law at the University of Pretoria. She also worked as a professional model with Alushi Models before she became Miss South Africa. She was then crowned as Miss South Africa on the 16th of October in 2021, which is this year. And as her prize for becoming Miss South Africa, she won 1 million rand, a fully furnished apartment in Sandton, like for a year, and then she got a 1-year lease on a Mercedes-Benz C-Class, as well as the opportunity to represent South Africa at Miss Universe. This year, Miss Universe will be hosted in Eilat, which is in the southern part of Israel, and the Miss SA organization has gotten a lot of backlash because they're going there, well, they're there right now to represent South Africa in Israel, which is kind of odd. So let me just give you like a backstory of why it's borderline embarrassing for South Africa to be going to Israel to participate in the Miss Universe pageant.
إذن قصف إسرائيلي في قطاع غزة لبرج الشروق كما أفاد مراسلنا قبل.
So I won't be going into the complete history of the Israel-Palestine conflict just because it goes back like to the late 19th century and into the early 20th century. I'll leave some links in the description box down below if you want to know like more about where the conflict started, and spoiler alert, we have to blame the Brits for it, as usual. Unless you're living under a rock, you know that all hell broke loose between Israel and Palestine at the beginning of this year, so around May. And this was fueled by Palestinians protesting unlawful evictions that were sanctioned by the Supreme Court of Israel. So Israel made these laws and then they decided to enforce them on the Palestinians. This conflict left hundreds of people dead and thousands of people injured, and Palestine received the worst, they had the worst effect of this conflict. So Israel fired 4,000 rockets into the Gaza Strip, and 600 of those landed into the Strip. While 90% of the rockets that were fired by Palestine didn't land into Israel because they have like an iron dome that protects them. Israel has conducted 1,500 air, land, and sea strikes onto the Gaza Strip. So there were calls for a ceasefire that were proposed on the 13th of May by Hamas, but they were rejected by the Israeli Prime Minister. I can't say his name, so I'll just like put it right there. So this minister. On the 18th of May, France, along with Egypt and Jordan, announced the filing of a United Nations Security Council resolution of a ceasefire, and the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas came into effect on the 21st of May in 2021. On the 16th of June in 2021, Hamas then fired air balloon, like incendiary balloons, which are like bombs in balloons, that were launched from the Gaza Strip into Israel, and the Israeli Air Force obviously responded with like multiple airstrikes into the Gaza Strip, and the fighting resumed. Israel has been declared as an apartheid state. So earlier this year, a New York-based human rights watch and the Israeli rights group separately said that Israel, the Israeli policies that are enforced towards the Palestinians can be compared to apartheid. They were drawing like comparison to the brutal system that was enforced in South Africa pre-1994. So the word apartheid is an Afrikaans word which means apartness. It was a system of institutionalized racial segregation in South Africa. These segregation policies were enforced on non-white South Africans. In 1961, the South African Prime Minister and the architect of South Africa's apartheid policies, Hendrik Verwoerd, dismissed Israel's vote against South Africa's apartheid at the United Nations, saying that Israel is not consistent in its new anti-apartheid attitude. They took Israel away from the Arabs after the Arabs lived there for thousands of years. In that, I agree with them. Like South Africa, Israel is an apartheid state. And that honestly says a lot coming from somebody who enforced these laws. So, y'all, if you ain't listening to Verwoerd, I don't know, like... There is also evidence that suggests that the laws that have been enforced by Israel, the Israeli government against the Palestinians, meets the United Nations definition of apartheid. Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory constitute as one of the territories under Israeli control. The Palestinians make up the total, they make up half of the total population, yet they are still under Israeli laws. And in practice, the Jewish Israelis and the Palestinian Israelis are treated differently in almost every aspect of life, including housing, their education, the health system, employment, their family life, residence, and even things like freedom of movement. There are dozens of Israeli laws and policies that institutionalize the system of racial segregation and domination. Israel has carried out various acts that are prohibited by the United Nations Apartheid Convention, and these include forcible removal of Palestinians to make way for illegal Israeli settlements, preventing the Palestinians from returning to their homes and their lands, including millions of refugees that have been sent to exile. Systemic and severe deprivation of fundamental human rights of the Palestinians based on their identity. Denying the Palestinians their right of freedom of movement and residence, as well as murder, torture, unlawful imprisonments, and other severe deprivations of physical liberty, and the persecution of the Palestinians because of their opposition to this apartheid sort of system. Again, I will be leaving links down below, so if you want to know more information, you can just watch the videos / documentaries that I've linked. So why should South Africa be bothered by the conflict that's happening between Palestine and Israel? Well, we've been there before. Like in South Africa, non-white South Africans were forced to live in separate areas from white individuals. They had separate laws compared to the white individuals. They had to use different facilities. Even though people of color make up the majority in South Africa, we were still like separated according to our race, and these laws kept us in bondage for the better part of 50 years. Well, not us as in me, but like our predecessors, our forefathers. My parents lived through apartheid, you know. So it's still kind of like a fresh system, and for us to like be going to Israel is really telling about where we stand in like systems of oppression. Although apartheid in Israel is bigger than a racial war, there are comparisons that can be drawn between that system and the system that was implemented in South Africa. Considering this, the Miss South Africa organization sending Lalela there is borderline disrespectful considering the history that we've been through as South Africans. On the 9th of November, the Miss South Africa organization released a statement simply stating that they would be sending Lalela to participate in Miss Universe as this is her childhood dream and they will not allow this country to bully her. They then drew comparison to Zozibini Tunzi, the former Miss Universe, embracing her natural hair as if that has anything to do with human rights violations, but that's none of my business. On the 10th of November, Stephanie Vale, who is the current CEO of the Miss South Africa organization, went on to the Clement Manyathela show on 702 to emphasize that Lalela going to the Miss Israel, well, isn't it? Lalela going on to the Miss Universe pageant in Israel was her personal choice. She wanted to participate in this pageant, and she also added that Lalela was going to be able to bring about change by participating in this pageant, and she would be able to form her own opinion through experience. I don't know about you, but like, what exactly do you need to experience to be able to stand up against human rights being violated? And isn't she like a lawyer? Anyway, the Miss South Africa organization made it clear that they are not a political organization, but like these women are called role models. They've spoken up publicly about their ambitions. They've spoken about like their natural hair, and this sounds very political to me. Like, I don't think the organization fully understands the definition of politics, but you don't need like a political affiliation or like to be part of government for something to be political. I mean, Lalela was even asked a political question during the Miss South Africa pageant. So clearly the Miss South Africa organization has conveniently misunderstood the word politics, or see it as something that is purely associated with like politics and being in government. The board member of the Africa for Palestine has stated that Israel had close relations with the apartheid government in South Africa. So clearly that's saying something. The board member stated that Israel continued to enjoy close relations with the apartheid government in South Africa. South Africa adopted the approach which favors resolution of the Israeli-Arab conflict through peaceful negotiations on the basis of the relevant United Nations. Sorry, I live close to a hospital. Anyway, on the basis of the relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions. Accordingly, full diplomatic relations with Palestine were established. the government downgraded its embassy in Tel Aviv to a liaison office in 2019, which is quite recent. This is clearly in line with the stance to support the Palestinian people, and the government has never recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. There is currently limited political and diplomatic interaction between South Africa and Israel, mainly due to Israel's antagonistic attitude towards the Middle East peace process and its disregard for international law regarding the rights of the Palestinians and their territories. South Africa has previously been at the center of political disputes when it comes to beauty pageants, because during apartheid we were banned from participating in Miss Universe and Miss World in the 1980s, and we were later allowed back to participate when Nelson Mandela was released from prison and we had our first democratic elections. Oh my gosh, I can't speak today. Nelson Mandela said, "We identify with the Palestinians because just like ourselves, they were fighting for the right of self-determination. We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." I don't know when he said this, but he said it. On the 19th of February, which was last month, the South African government withdrew their support for Miss South Africa 2021 from going to Israel after asking and begging for her to withdraw and being ignored by the organization. They refused to associate themselves with the 70th annual Miss Universe pageant, which would be hosted in Eilat, Israel, because the atrocities that are committed by Israel against the Palestinians is well documented. So if the government refuses to support her, then who will she be representing on the 13th of December? In response to the pageant being hosted in Israel, Miss Greece, Miss Barbados, Miss Morocco, Miss Laos, Miss Malaysia, and Miss Indonesia have therefore withdrawn from the pageant. Miss Greece specifically withdrew from this year's Miss Universe pageant, citing the atrocities on the Palestinian people as the basis thereof. In 2002, Miss South Africa, who was Vanessa Carrera, as well as the Miss South African rights holder at the time, which was Sun International, they withdrew from the Miss World pageant, which was hosted in Nigeria as a result to the alleged human rights violations, women's rights, and the religious concerns. After other contestants similarly withdrew from this pageant, it was then relocated to London. So I feel like if there were enough people that withdrew from Miss Universe, maybe it would have been relocated to somewhere else, but that's actually like the fault of the Miss Universe organizers. Everything that has been happening in Israel should have been like reason enough for Lalela to withdraw from the competition. What exactly did she need to experience to acknowledge the magnitude of the conflict that's going on? But at the same time, is she to blame, or is it Miss Universe's fault for hosting it in Israel to begin with? And if she wasn't Miss South Africa and somebody else was elected as Miss South Africa, would that person have also decided to fulfill their childhood dream and like gone on to participate in Miss Universe? Or could she possibly have just like withdrawn from this year's competition but participated in next year's competition? I have no idea. Regardless of who is to blame, Lalela's reputation will be ruined, and she will go down in history as the Miss South Africa who went on to participate in an apartheid state. She will be known as the Miss South Africa who ignored the pleas of her country to boycott this year's pageant. She'll be known as somebody who chose to stand on the side of the oppressor, and even though the organization claims to be apolitical, Lalela will also be known as the Miss South Africa who decided to pose for photos with the deputy mayor of Israel. I hope that she wins on the 13th, because I know South Africans are unforgiving and they will drag her if she doesn't make it. Anyway, that's it for today's video. Please comment down below what you think. Let me know what you think about this whole situation, and please be safe out there as we approach the festive season, and I hope to see you in the next video. Remember to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. It helps with the algorithm. I'm not even on the algorithm's good side yet, but y'all, if you keep leaving those comments, we can make it to 1K soon. Thank you so much. Bye.